with on a more sort of micro level, but this is the macro overview of like sort of the general principles that I apply to, working with people and guiding people. Obviously, everybody's a little bit different, but there is some similarities between every system, right? And one of the things is, and we can relate this to taking any journey, right? Like we like to use the cliche of a fitness journey, but any journey, like you have to have some sort of destination in mind, some type of ideal outcome, right? So the starting point usually with mindset is like we need to envision sort of like the best case scenario, right? And we need to connect that to our purpose behind achieving that best case scenario. So what that looks like is this, and usually I'll talk to people and I'd be like, hey, anything that's standing in your way aside, because usually when we come to someone for help with a goal, we have things in our way. All those things aside, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 months, what does it look like? Like, what do you look like? What does your life look like when you've solved X problem, right? So whatever your problem is or thing that you're trying to overcome, what does your life look like at that point, right? So, say someone's like, I want to be a billionaire, right? They're like, I have private jets, I have, like literally like fantasy land, what is the best possible outcome, right? And then we try to work backwards from there. So we look at what that best possible outcome is, and then we attach an emotion to it. The emotion we attach to is the why, or the deeper motivation, right? Because people can come and they're like, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds, right? I'm like, all right, that's great. So does everybody. We all do. It'd be awesome, right? Why do you want to lose those 20 pounds? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I want to feel better. Okay, like, well, why do you want to feel better? Do you not feel good now? Well, I used to be about 20 pounds lighter, and my high school reunion's coming up, and I'd like to, feel a little bit better about myself when I get there. Now we have something to work with, right? We've identified sort of the anchor to that behavior that we're trying to modify. So it's like really looking for like, why is this important to you? And asking yourself that question on a personal level, rather than being like, well, I want to lose 20 pounds. That's the what, like that's the outcome. And that's kind of superficial. More connection to the emotion or the why or the reasoning behind it and how you're going to feel. When we can connect strongly to that, that's when it's like in the days when you're tired, you're hungry, there's temptation. You don't care about the 20 pounds. You attach to the feeling or the outcome that you're going to have. And that's what's really important. So that's the starting point, having that why. And then we work backwards from there. And it's pretty much just like a math problem. So it's like, okay, here's what you want to get at the end. Let's reverse engineer the program to get there, or the plan to get there. And one way to do that is to set SMART goals. Have you heard this about SMART goals before?
No. And I think it sounds cool. Like this stuff can apply to, our careers, professionally.
100%. And SMART goals are just this acronym, right? That means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely, right? So specific is like, if you're like, I want to be fit. Okay, like, how would you like to be fit, right? Like, what does that mean to you? What does fitness mean to you? So we used the weight loss example before of like, I want to lose 20 pounds. So that would be a specific goal, right? And that goal is also measurable, right? So I want to lose 20 pounds has that, quantifiable metric that we're going to measure. And then the other question you have to ask with your goal is like, is it achievable, right? It's like, if I was like, I want to be a billionaire by the end of 2021 and I have $0 in the bank, I mean, it's not inconceivable, but it's highly unlikely, right? So if someone's like, I want to lose 100 pounds in 3 months, but highly unlikely, right? If someone's like, I want to lose 20 pounds in 6 months or 20 pounds in 3 months, depending on where they're starting, then that could be achievable, right? Realistic is similar to achievable, but in the sense that if you work like 5 jobs, you have 3 kids, and your house is on fire all the time, is it realistic that you're going to be able to go to the gym 6 days a week? Right? So you have to make sure that one, is the goal in a best case scenario achievable? And then based on your circumstances, is it realistic? Right? And then lastly, did you pick a time domain that allows it to happen? Right? If you came to me and were like, I want to lose 20 pounds in a week, I'd be like, you're talking to the wrong guy. That's not happening. Right? So that's sort of the outline for it. And when we set the goals, we use those as kind of the metric to go through within there. And like you said, this applies to way more than fitness. So it's pretty cool in that way. Now, the thing that people get tripped up on, right, is they set these goals and then it's a binary situation. So this is what we were talking about before, right? Where it's like, I'm either all in or all out. So you ever hear people that say like, I'm on a diet? You ever heard that before? Like, I'm on a diet?
Yeah.
Okay.
That most Americans go.
Yeah. So that infers that then there must be an off the diet, right? So that's the problem with, people like to use the buzzword like diet culture, but the main problem is essentially that it's a binary situation. Like you're either in or you're out. There's no lifestyle, right? It's either like I'm eating like crap or I'm eating well, however they define that. And I think that's very damaging, because when people do encounter, mistakes or failure or slip ups, which are inevitable because we're human or fallible, they don't have a plan B. There's no recourse when your goal is perfection, right? So it's like when you only have yes or no, there's no in between, and we exist in this gray area, right? So I always talk to all my clients and I'm like, hey, like, how much better were you than yesterday, right? So we have the sliding scale. So, right, say like 10 is perfection. That's the unattainable or the unachievable. Right now, this day here, your behavior puts you at a 3. You're eating, not very consistently, maybe going to the gym once a week, your sleep is all over the map. So you're maybe like a 3, right? Now, traditionally, you'd be like, well, I have to be a 10. That's the only way, right? And if I'm not a 10, I'm a failure. So I might as well be a 0. But the way that I kind of encourage people to look at it is like, okay, today you're a 3. If next week you're a 4, you're doing great. Because the week after you could be a 5, right? And that's the same approach with weight loss that people take too, where they're like, okay, like I have to lose 20 pounds, right? And I'm like, no. You just have to lose 1 pound every week, right? So like, you just have to be just a little bit better each week. And if we zoom out in the scope of time, right? And you're like, would you rather lose 20 pounds in 30 days or, 40 pounds in a year? I would always say 40 pounds in a year, because statistically the chances of you keeping it off are much higher, right? So it's like making sure that you're not setting yourself up from failure from the beginning. So, are you holding yourself to a standard of perfection, or are you measuring yourself against your previous self? And are you improving against that previous self? Are you checking in along the way with that? And that's sort of the way I would look at everything. So it's like, were you perfect with your workouts or in every workout? There's no possible way. But were you better than last time? Is there something you can look at that you improved upon? If you were on a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 is the like unattainable perfection, like how close did you get? And that would be kind of the measuring stick. So then there's no like in or out completely right there. And you give yourself grace essentially to be human within that. And have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule?
Maybe.
There's sort of this mathematical proof. It's called Pareto's principle. It's basically it's found like throughout the universe. It's very strange in that like from like business, like finance, all the way to like the distribution of matter in the cosmos. So it's that like 20% of the effort produces 80% of the result, right? Like we see this especially in the economy, like 20% of people in the world hold 80% of the wealth, right? And yeah, and like if you actually look at the distribution of matter in the universe, like 80% of the matter in the universe is dark matter, right? Which is like undefinable and unmeasurable and stuff like that. And it's weird. Like look up Pareto's principle. It's like kind of creepy and strange. But the idea like in the fitness realm is like 100% is unattainable. If you can be 80% good, you're still better than most people that are going to flip 50-50. Because chances are if they're approaching things with a binary, like sort of mentality, they're going to be on half the time and off half the time because they're average. So it's going to average out to 50%. So if you're 3 degrees above that, you're going to see progress because you're moving forward, right? So 80 is like a baseline. And then it's like, okay, like I have an event or something coming up. For a short period of time, I'm going to be 90% adherent, right? Like I'm going to push that to a 9 out of 10 in terms of my adherence, right? But the point is always that we're leaving room to slip up a bit so that when we do slip up, it wasn't unintended. We didn't fail. We didn't screw up. It was part of the plan. We planned to screw up. It's like when you plan a cheat meal and you have no guilt versus when you go off the diet and you eat and you have all this guilt and it steamrolls into like binge eating or something like that. It's like when you plan and integrate a slip up or being human into the program, you're much more likely to stay consistent with it over time. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's just a completely like, we're just too hard on ourselves basically. Like that. Okay, so this is the big thing. We'll kind of bring it back to goal setting, right? So have you ever heard of like the power of positive thinking?
Sure, like generally.
Yeah, just generally. Yeah, like what have you heard about it before?
Yes.
Like have you heard anything specifically about like that concept of the power of positive thinking?
Well, maybe I'm thinking of more like cognitive behavioral, like, which is different because that's like, even if you're not feeling good, do healthy habits and things. That's sort of like probably the opposite. That's like, you know, trying to get your actions to increase positivity in your mind. How would you define like positive thinking?
Yeah, I think what you're saying definitely has merit, because we know that like it's sort of like a chicken or egg situation sometimes, right? Like, did the thought precede the action, or did the action create the thought? Right. And
Yes.
sometimes like when you're unable to like conceive of a positive thought, like just the fact that you're doing something builds a sense of self-efficacy and reminds you that you're capable of good things, and you start to move forward. I definitely agree with that. I think that's really important. In this case though, I'd say like people say like the power of positive thinking is like, oh, you want to lose 100 pounds? Just believe it's true and it's going to happen. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, fine. How are you going to do it? Like, that's great. Like, you know, that's like me saying like, I want to get to New York City. And then I'm like, I don't have a map, but I'm really sure I'm going to get there, you know? So it's like, I'm just going to head east forever and I'll be there, you know? And that's what a lot of people do. They're like, you know, I want to, right? They don't say things like, I will, I have a plan for, you know, the language that they use. So in terms of goal setting, you know, in conjunction with the SMART goals, there's this concept of WOOP, which is like wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan, right? So it's a very much more pragmatic approach to goal setting. So wish is like our big goal, right? Say that we wanted to lose 100 pounds, which is a big goal, right? That's our wish. And the outcome of that is that emotional tie to what we want from that experience. So what will our life be like when we lose 100 pounds? How will our life be better, right? Like, how will we interact with people in our lives? How will we feel and talk about ourselves? Really deep emotional subconscious connection to that goal. And then the really important point that most people miss when they set goals and they're thinking positively, what's going to stop you from that, right? If you have like a history of binge eating, you know, if you have, you know, like a family that eats unhealthy that you live with, if you work a night shift job, like what are the obstacles that in the past have prevented you from losing this 100 pounds? Because clearly you haven't done it yet. You didn't just wake up usually today and decide this was important, like you've known for some time. So it's like, what are the things that are going to get in the way? And then you plan around them. So you say, okay, my family, you know, like they're enablers, like they, you know, they overfeed, and that's how they show love and emotion. Like, am I going to build sort of like a resiliency that I can say no to them? Might it be a time for me to distance myself for a short period of time, or set up boundaries and say, no, thank you, and I just don't want you to offer that to me? Like, what's your plan, right? Because if you don't include that step and you just go wish an outcome, when those obstacles come, you're going to fall off track. And that's the important part, is like, you know, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's sort of kind of cliche, but at the same time, that's what it is. Like, you know, no plan is a plan to fail. And that's the issue that a lot of people run into. They're overly optimistic without any pragmatism involved in their goal setting. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Yes, I mean, a lot of it, you know, like, but I mean, I agree with the principle, like positive thinking, hopeful thinking, really good. But like, what's the plans? What are the steps to get there? Like, we live in a physical world with limitations. Things are time sensitive, intensive. Things take resources. Yes, I definitely see that. There's a lot of steps involved. And the hardest part is like, I think I was someone who could identify the obstacles, but not sufficiently plan around them. So whether it be mental health, or for sure the bad eating habits of my parents, and so when I was around them, I would eat worse. That's almost worse. So I could identify the obstacles, but not adequately get a plan in place to get around them. Other than when I was not living with my parents, then I was always like a lot thinner and more fit. But
sure, it's funny how that works. Or like, have you ever noticed when you go on vacation, you never get tired? Or like, you know, when you change your setting and you remove sort of the attachments of like previous behaviors, things become easy.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. I think too, like to your point, like about, you know, knowing what the obstacles are, but not being able to plan. I think a useful strategy in that case for some people, you know, obviously none of this is generic, right? These are always for some people and not for some people, is to look at yourself as someone else. Talk to yourself as you would someone else. So you take a friend or someone you care about, and they're going through what you're going through. What advice would you give them? As a third party, emotionally removed from the situation, what would you tell them in that situation? It's like, everybody who's been in a bad relationship before, like they're so in it that they're blinded to sort of the obvious truth. They're so emotionally connected. But if you have a friend who's in a bad relationship, you're like, you need to get out of that. Like, that's not good for you, kind of thing. Then if you can remove yourself from the situation and look at it as objectively as possible, write down like objectively, like, hey, like in the example we're using, like this person needs to lose 100 pounds because they're unhealthy and they're at health risk, like their risk for cardiovascular disease is very high. And the reason that they're having this problem is they live in this house that's enabling them to eat the food. What would you tell them? And you'd be like, move out. You got to get away from these people. And then, and that's challenging, I think, because we're so close to our decisions and our emotions. But in that case, I think that's, an important thing. But yeah, I mean, these are hard things for sure. But I think, like you said, like having a plan is always really important there as you go through. So this connects back to, our larger statement that we talked about. And this one's not as much of sort of like a measurable sort of, this is more of a, qualifying thing that we talked about. And when we first met, I asked you this question too. I ask everybody this question because I think it's so important. It's like, what you want, how you do it, and when you want it done are less important than why you want it, because that has the emotional connection. And like, ultimately, like, we make decisions with emotion and we rationalize them with facts afterwards. So we truly go with our gut in that sense. Do you remember when we talked about like your why and everything?
Yeah, early on.
Yeah. So I bug everybody with this question because I think it's really important. People don't identify with what you do or how you do it. They identify with why you do it. If you look around, like the people that are in your life that you've self-selected, right? Not family, but like friends and people in your social circle, like after a certain point in your life, you probably have some things in common with them on a deep sort of like value level. Like they probably value things that are similar. They probably view the world in a similar way. And that would be a connection with your why. So in an example of fitness that we used before, like, say that you wanted 20-inch biceps, right? For some example, right? And that was your goal. That's the what, right? And how you're going to do that is obviously go to the gym, eat a bunch, and maybe use some special supplements at some point, because 20-inch biceps are pretty crazy, right? But the why you want that is deeper, right? Like maybe your role model growing up that you most identified with had like huge biceps, and you're like, I want to be that person. That makes me feel strong. It makes me feel powerful. It makes me feel confident, right? And that's like a powerful thing to feel confident, and that's a motivation or seeking pleasure motivation. Another one might be pain, right? Like if someone was picked on and they felt that by being physically powerful and strong, they could compensate for that, right? And that's running from pain, because people either run from pain or they run towards pleasure. So your why is either leading you towards something pleasurable, whether it's like social engagement or interaction or something, or it's running away from pain or something that's painful to protect you from, so that's the thing that I think a lot of people miss. Like they know the what of their goal, right? Usually when you get down to it, but like once you identify that why, that's the thing in the dark when you're like, you're tired, you're alone, and like, there's cheesecake in the break room or donuts and you want those. Like if you have a strong sense of that why and you're keeping in touch with that and being mindful of that, that's sort of the thing that I think goes through. So let's talk about your why. So at this point, we've been working together for a little while. Like, do you have a strong connection to your why behind all the hard work you're putting in?
I would say yes. I would say very strong. That makes it all the more harder when I see the years I've sort of strayed from that why and just sort of gave up and was eating whatever and was overweight. It goes to really deep stuff. It goes not just to who I fundamentally want to be as a person, but also my past and my history, like growing up overweight, having parents. My mother was very overweight. I would say, Brandon, like in all honesty, both my parents passed away from obesity. So like, and I've been obese myself and I've lost it and then gained it back. But like, I've seen, like, no one knows. A lot of people know, gonna be dramatic, but I know what this does. Like, I know how the story ends. I know how compromise is you physically, but I really know how compromise is self-esteem. And so that is why, like, I don't want to give up. I want to dig in, and like it is a problem I need to solve. Like with my history, there were times during COVID when I was eating whatever, and just really depressed, couldn't go to the gym, and it's like, okay, is this it? Should I just be a fat attorney? It's not the worst thing to be. Hey, I've been, like, am I just going to give up on this thing? And well, obviously, I decided like no, like this is not fundamentally the choice I want to make for myself or how I want to see myself. But it's a lot of like deep, crazy personal stuff with, my family and my past, and not really so much about other people, not even so much about the end result in terms of how I look. Do I have aesthetic goals? Of course, but it's more about creating a new path for myself than sort of like the overweight, fast food eating childhood I was raised in, if that makes any sense.
Well, I would say like in achieving your goal, which you're well on your way to, by the way, what will that prove to you about yourself? What statement will that make about you to yourself?
That I can be better than, just in terms of nutrition, if not other areas, my less than ideal childhood, and I can escape and become my own person, separate from, the past I was, we can't control things when we're children. We can't control what we eat, like those choices are made for us. So coming into my own as a person, and also like all this stuff with fitness is, I'm naturally a nerd. I'm drawn to nerdy things. Those come easy to me. This is something as an adult I sought out myself, and no one ever like pulled me into a gym. Like this is something I've sort of found on my own. So I think it's like crucial to my journey. So the why is trying to be a better version of myself. I guess that sounds trite when you say it. I guess that's everyone's why.
Yeah, but I think I would say for you, just because I have the outside perspective of listening to you say this now, it sounds almost like yes, best version of yourself, but that is, overused in a lot of ways, like you said. But in a sense, it's you exercising control, right? Like you're saying essentially like your identity, it's establishing self-efficacy. Like I determine my fate. This is me stepping in. Like I was supposed to be this thing, but I'm going to be this person instead because it's my choice and I put the effort towards it and I create the story.
Yes.
Like that's
like,
what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yeah, like change my destiny, becoming this like brand new thing, taking all the good things about, that fat nerdy kid that existed, and we have to remember our past lest we, just repeat it. But yeah, finding that, like, this helps me sort of find my own voice and just lets me find who I want to be as a person. And certainly like, the people I look up to, I think it's important to, we all have like heroes and that do amazing things, but, not just look from a distance, not just idolize people, but what can we learn from them? What do we want to improve about ourselves? Yeah, it just comes down to fundamental stuff, like who I want to be. And I don't want to be this right now, still, being respectful to who I am and trying to focus on the good things. I see something else I want, for myself.
Sure. But I would say also it's an extension of who you are as a person anyways, to like achieve at something, right? So you're just picking a different activity or playing field to achieve it.
Yes. Something I don't know if I'm like inherently good at anything, but something new and way outside my comfort zone, and something I was younger, I never thought I could do. Like, I guess there's a mentality when you're fat and not athletic of like, oh, that's for other people. That's for jobs, or that's for athletes. And like, even if I wanted that, I can't have it, and lots of crazy walls we build around ourselves. So I think coming into it and losing the weight the first time, then especially getting really into the gym, and this was probably in my early 30s, still later, I was like, and doing really well and like having a like respectable deadlift. I was like, wait, this can be for me. This can be my goal. This can be my story. It's not just for other people. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. And I think you bring up like one of the reasons that like I find fitness so powerful beyond obviously like, just sort of like the surface level superficial enjoyment of it and sort of like, the literally superficial things you get, like looking better, in terms of the way that society defines looking good. But it's a proving ground. It's a testing lab for like sort of like what discipline and your ability to control yourself and will yourself to do something can produce that you can then extrapolate from and transfer into other areas of your life. Like it's a universal skill set, and that's why I think it's so powerful. And you almost like took a skill set that you had from other areas of your life and then put it into the gym in reverse.
Right. But yes, it's this like really, I think, healthy competition with yourself. Like I'm not, worried about what other people are doing, obviously.
Yeah.
There's always someone bigger and stronger, but it's like, what did I leave on the floor that day? Like, and obviously not every workout is this amazing, like pushing yourself the max, but yeah, it's yeah. It also shuts off, you're a rational guy, like I'm a rational guy, like, the thinking logical, attorney part, it's a much needed break from that, where like you're fully immersed in something else and you can like, I don't know. I just think it helps with mental clarity too, as kind of an escape in its own way.
Yeah, 100%. And like, we don't live through our bodies as much as we, who knows what we were designed for, but in the sense that like we have a ton of physical capacity. Like, society was not always so pleasant to humans. We didn't have civilization. So like we lived through our physical presence for so long in our, throughout our history as a species. And now we don't really have to. Like you could literally sit on your couch, order food, work, survive, basically get up to go to the bathroom in the bed, and then just live that, be successful by the way that society defines success without ever really using your body. So I think it kind of, opens up or unleashes sort of these like primal sort of like reward systems as well, that we get from exercise, where it's like, oh, that when people first start working out, like all the things they say they want to do, lose weight, all that kind of stuff, like that takes a long time. For most people, like they don't see that for like 2-3 months, but the thing that keeps them going is they feel so good. And that's some type of like dopamigenic reward system that we have built in. That's like, hey, we should exercise. They've actually done studies. Have you heard of like the runner's high?
Oh, sure. Isn't there an endorphin or something like?
Yeah, it's a combination of like endorphins and dopamine. But so the reason that we have that, and it's called the persistence reward system, is that mammals that pursued game survived and passed on their genes. So they had to create some type of chemical reward system in their brain that would help them to overcome hard physical efforts, because they're uncomfortable and they're challenging to the body. So that's why when you do a hard workout, you feel so good afterwards. It's a little dose of reward to make you come back and do it again. So it's built into us, because like our biological adaptation to survival is actually really good long distance runners. Nothing else on the planet can run as long as us, which is kind of weird. Yeah, that's I mean, obviously we have highly developed brains, but like physically we're slow. We don't jump very high. We can't swim that well, and we're not even fast climbers or burrowers, but we can actually outrun. Like there's a race in Arizona where they have humans run against horses and they win, because it's like a 150-mile race. The humans win. So, that's our sort of biological adaptation to survival, and we get that dopamine reward for doing it. So yeah, it's literally hardwired into us to work out. So anyone that says working out is bad for you, that's what I want to tell them. Like that.
Oh God. Wait.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't believe them now. So when we talk about goals too, to switch track a little bit, we've worked on this too, right? Like everybody's obsessed with sort of the outcome of their goal, right? Like I want to lose 100 pounds, or like I want this or I want that. But I think in large ways that's very disempowering, right? Because those goals are often so large that they're out of our control, right? Like if you look at all the variables involved in losing 100 pounds, right? Like say someone's on track to lose 100 pounds and they get in a car accident and they can't work out for 6 months. Are they going to lose 100 pounds? Probably not, right? There's all these things that can step in the way of us achieving those outcome goals. So I think it's and also the scope of time involved, when we talked about the time, is so far out that it can be challenging for people to even stay attached to that goal for so long. And that's why I find it's much better for people to focus on behavior goals, which are short term. So you get a quick reward response from them and you start to build habits, right? So outcome goal is lose 100 pounds. So you knowing what you know about fitness, like what is one behavior that someone would have to adapt to lose 100 pounds?
Knowing what they eat, like knowing their calories per day. I mean, there's just no way. You can't be guessing. Right?
Yeah, you'd have to track your food, right? So just like we do, that person would have to track their food, right? And that's something that's easily measurable, right? It falls within the SMART goal sort of spectrum. And we can track it every day, apps in like 2 minutes or whatever. So that person tracked their food for 365 days. There is no way that they're not eating healthier, right? Because they're just bringing mindfulness to it. So maybe they don't lose 100 pounds, but they're going to be healthier, right? So we talked about the spectrum. They're going to be heading in the right direction, you know, and they have something every day that they can check off as a box. So they get a little dopamine reward for doing that, and it starts to be habitualized, and then they get closer and closer. And that's why I always tell clients, it's like the magic happens, right? The magic is basically like you put in the work for all this time, but you weren't paying attention at where you were going. You were just like doing a thing. Your head was down, you're working. And then you get, if you're trying to lose weight or trying to max out your bench press, you get in the bench press and you just like PR by 20 pounds out of nowhere. And it's like, well, yeah, you're doing your speed sets and your strength sets twice a week at your 60 and 70%, but you were focusing on your accessory work. You haven't touched the heavy bar in 6 months, but guess what? You put in all the work and there it is, like that. Same thing for weight loss kind of thing. So, you know, the difference obviously in this example is like tracking your food daily versus the outcome goal of losing 20 pounds. So, and we work on that, right? Like the tiny habits in between and there. By the way, I don't know, have you ever read the book Atomic Habits?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm not like super big on like self-helpy books, but this one, like I'm very much a routine person. So I'm very intrigued on like how people construct their routine. But there's this book, Atomic Habits. And I found it, like, of the books I've read about like routine building and habit formation, like to be the most like accessible and also effective. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. So if you have time, it's a fast read.
Oh yeah. No, I'm super interested. I mean, it will help, you know, my profession, like, you know, yeah, like everything has to be logged. You know, I have numbers all day, every day. What are my billable hours? What are my billable minutes? So, you know,
habits are huge. Even things we don't think are habitual. Like we don't consciously create the habits, but like brushing your teeth, probably don't think about like, oh man, I got to go do that right now. Well, usually, unless it's like really late at night or something, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where it's like we've done this unconsciously in some ways, and it's about like setting up the reward system appropriately. So that book is great if you have the time. But I guess in summation about all this with like the goals, like if we were to create sort of a step-by-step process, because I'm like you, I'm super process oriented. I like to know the map, but show me the roadmap to what I want, kind of thing. You know, like we talked about, you want to start backwards. So like visualize what you want at the end, right? Like what is that thing? What is your dream outcome? Like what is the best possible scenario out of here? And then plan backwards, right? And back to those WHOOP goals, like we want to plan, like look at, like hope for the best kind of thing, but then acknowledge the obstacles that may be in the way, whether it's like people that aren't going to be supportive, events coming up that we have to plan for, things like that, and then create a plan that's going to help us overcome those obstacles. Once we start and actually start doing the work, rather than focusing back on that big goal all the time, we should be focusing on our daily habits. Are we checking off those boxes? Are we logging food? Are we weighing in? Are we communicating with our support system? Are we working out? Are we tracking all those things, right? And then the last piece that so much of us forget to do is like stay accountable and check in regularly. Maybe sometimes it's like with us with a coach or something, but also like, are you checking in with yourself? Like, are you making sure, you know, like, are you mindful about what you're doing with your body if your behaviors are in conjunction with your goals? You know, like, do your actions follow your intentions? You know, like if you intend to be healthy and then you go drink a 6-pack of beer, it's like, wait a second, there's some conflict going on with where you want to be and how you're acting. So like, you need to get in the middle of that conflict and be like, what's going on here? Right. And that's the thing I think a lot of people fail to do. But there's obviously no like single roadmap for success or anything like that by any means. But this is generally the approach that I see work for a lot of people that I work with in terms of clients, is just kind of reverse and engineering back like that. But yeah, so what did you think? Any questions about all that good stuff?
No, it was really good. That's like a good presentation. I mean, this is good stuff to do. I mean, especially in the professional world, like people are looking for good, speakers like this and good presentations. Like this really can apply across many, many disciplines, which is solid.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, if there's ever anyone you want to invite in too, like I'm happy to have them join and check out the Zoom too, if they want to jump in and also share too. Like I'm always happy to like we have great discussions. If you have people that they have questions or they want to add to it, like I'm all about that too. I love that opportunity. I'm gonna drop this book for you in the chat.
Okay, sweet.
Like that, yeah. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. And always like questions and stuff. Like I'm a big discussion guy. Do you know I was a teacher before?
No. Like, what kind of teacher?
I was a high school teacher for 5 years.
No way.
Yeah. So that's like, I'm used to like facilitating discussion, presenting and stuff. So this is like right up my alley. So that's what I like to do. But yeah, so always good stuff. What do you feel like were the big takeaways from you, or for you rather?
The why, like, or at least getting people to think about not just the outcome, that's great, but the why they're doing it. Like asking questions about what is the fundamental, motivation. And then also identifying obstacles, like we've all tried, especially on our fitness journeys, most people do not nail it the first time. So when we've fallen off the fitness wagon, what happened? Like, or some of us like me have made some mistakes several times, like identifying the obstacles and coming up with that plan to get around them, and engaging in a process like this, like asking for help or coming up with a structure, like I know I keep going back to it, but the counting and tracking of calories is huge. I think I fall into the trap of just kind of eyeballing, feeling like you're eating healthy, but then the weekend comes around, you loosen up, and like, how many calories? No one knows. And no one can, I think, hit their fitness goals, not that. So being willing to track metrics. That's true of most professions too, like numbers in this world do matter, and they do help us know, when we're moving ahead or when we're off course. And I think that's it too. Like sometimes people start to drift and don't even know, because the drift is slow, and then they're way in the weeds. So
yes, agreed. I'll borrow one of my own coaches' lines. You have to inspect what you expect.
Sure.
Yeah, just a little cheesy line to throw in there, but for sure, I'm definitely with you. I think people are so afraid of data, but it's like in a lot of ways it sets you free.
Yeah. No, data is really important. The bigger picture why, because if you're just focused on like, a kind of specific weight goal, I think it can also be easier to get caught up in what other people are doing. And I think, especially on a fitness journey, or especially like being an overweight person, it's really important to make it an internal and personal process. Because if you get distracted at all by where other people are at, or like anyone on Instagram, you're gonna, you can't open that door where you're starting to feel bad about yourself because of what other people are doing. So that fundamental question of why you're doing it and trying to get in touch with that base motivation is so important. Like,
yeah, it's your sort of individual goal coming out, rather than kind of being like, oh, that person has that, I want that.
Right. Like,
yeah, because I feel like that there's no persistence in superficial motivation. Like you might be able to get like something short term, like I'm getting ready for vacation or something like that. But like the moment that you're able to tap into sort of like why it's on a deeper level, emotional level, more like important to you, that's when you're like, okay, like I'll basically run through fire to get this now. Like this is me, I get this.
And I think appreciating when you are getting closer to there, getting there. And that's one thing I still need to conquer. Like for different reasons, I don't feel either time I've lost a bunch of weight, I appreciated getting there. I don't know if I still felt like, oh, I still have 10 pounds to lose, or, I know the last time I was really fit, I wasn't working. So that created this, negative source of self-esteem. But I think really respecting and again, that goes what you're always saying, like respecting the journey and not just being hyper focused on the destination. But I guess that's probably a separate thing I need to figure out. Like, but if you have everything in place and you have the system up and running, then there's no final destination. You know, you're still tracking everything.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have to set individual metrics, but it's surrounding this whole narrative of like, I am a healthy person is an extension of who I am. Right. And then you're setting, like, obviously, like me, like, you know, we're both into exercise. Like, I'm not going to train the same way every year of my life. Like, I'm going to set that, like, I want to get stronger. I want to put on more muscle. I want to get leaner. Like, I want to be more athletic. Like, variance is important, but it's all within the larger construct of like, health is important to me. Like, I spend time in the gym. I eat healthy. I fuel my body. Like that bigger narrative of like who you tell yourself you are, kind of thing.
Yes, making like fundamental decisions about like who you want to be, you know, and like, yeah, it should never come down to a diet. Like, eating healthy has to be a part of who you are, you know. It has to be, I guess, lifestyle, but I don't know, even more like lifestyles come and go. You know, you're looking at like, yeah, just the person you want to be, you know, in the time we have. So
yeah, lifestyle. I used to wear Vans and pretend I was a skater, so lifestyles do come and go.
Yeah, I know, and people have fitness fad, you know, lifestyles, and that's okay. Again, it doesn't like, I've love for everyone, none of my business, but you know, yeah, this is more fundamental to me because I know I want it, and I'm not gonna give up. You know, like I'm gonna find a way to be consistent. That